the biggest winner at UFC 304 was former UFC welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. Now, you're going to say, how can he be the biggest winner? He didn't even fight on the card. What about Paddy Pimblett? What about Tom Aspinall? What about the champion of his division, Belal Muhammad? How come those guys weren't the biggest winner at UFC 304? How come it's Kamaru Usman? Well, let's take a look at some of those guys. Paddy Pimblett had a great performance against King Green. He went out there and did exactly what he needed to do, which was win in spectacular fashion. And with that win, he got himself into the rankings. But he's still 2 to 3 fights away from a title shot. Then you have Tom Aspinall, who did what he needed to do. Redeemed himself. He didn't really lose the first fight to Curtis Blades. He got injured in that fight, but it's still a loss on his record. So he needed to go in there and redeem himself and get that win back. And then he also needed to win in spectacular fashion to continue to build momentum. And he went out and he did that. So he did great. But Aspinall is still kind of in the dark because we still don't know what his future looks like. Is his next fight going to be against Jon Jones? Is Jon Jones going to fight Stipe and then fight Tom Aspinall after that fight if he wins? If Stipe wins, is he going to go and fight Tom Aspinall after he beats Jon Jones? There's rumors going around that the winner of that fight and the loser of that fight will both retire. So it's still not a guarantee what Tom Aspinall's next fight is going to be. Is it going to be the big fight that everyone wants to see against Jon Jones? Tom Aspinall is going to unify the belts against him. Like, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered about Tom Aspinall. That's why he wasn't the biggest winner. He was a big winner at UFC 304, but he wasn't the biggest winner. And then Belal Muhammad, he went out there and he did what a lot of people didn't think he was going to do, which was beat Leon Edwards. A lot of people thought he wasn't going to win this fight, and he went out and he won the fight. And a lot of people always said that he would never be champion, but here he is. He's the champion. He proved everybody wrong. He was asking for a title shot, and he finally got his opportunity to fight for the belt, and he made the most of it. So he was a big winner, but he wasn't the biggest winner at UFC 304. Kamaru Usman was the biggest winner at UFC 304. Kamaru Usman was in the worst possible position you can be in as a fighter in this sport. Kamaru Usman, yes, he's a great champion. He's one of the greatest welterweight champions of all time in the UFC, one of the greatest welterweights in the history of this sport. No doubt about it. But he was in a horrible position prior to UFC 304 because he's an aging MMA fighter who doesn't have a weight class. That's the worst possible position you can be in, is to be a guy who at one point in time was the number one fighter in the world, suffered a few losses, changed weight classes, lost his most recent fight, lost in the weight class that he was changing to, and doesn't have a path to a title at either weight class that he's fighting in, whether it's 170 or 185. So at 170, he didn't have a path to a title because the guy blocking him from another title fight was the current champion at the time. Prior to UFC 304, Leon Edwards was blocking Kamaru Usman from ever getting another title shot because he had won 2 out of 3 fights against Kamaru, and they were the 2 most recent fights. So Kamaru was in a pretty bad spot at welterweight. Then at middleweight, he also was in a bad spot because he changed weight classes hoping to get a fresh coat of paint on his career, and he lost that fight. Although he took it on short notice, there were a lot of things that played a factor in him losing that fight, but he did lose the fight, and he didn't get the opportunity to breathe in some new life into his career at a different weight class. Then you factor in who's fighting for the title now. So even if he won against Khamzat Chimaev, look who's fighting for the title next month. It's going to be his friend Israel Adesanya. So if Israel Adesanya were to defeat Dricus du Plessis and become middleweight champion again, here we are again with no path for Kamaru Usman to a title shot. Had he even stuck around, all right, let's say he lost the fight to Chimaev, but then let's say he fought another time in between the Chimaev fight, and now he fought another middleweight and he won that fight, and now he's a contender. Well, he still doesn't have a path to a title shot, because if Israel Adesanya wins the title, he's said numerous times that they're not going to fight, so here he is again. He's right back in no man's land. But now with Belal Muhammad defeating Leon Edwards and becoming UFC welterweight champion and clearing the path for Kamaru Usman, now he has a clear path towards a title shot. And that's why he was the biggest winner at UFC 304, even though he didn't fight on the card. It's because now he has a clear and obvious path to regaining the welterweight championship. Kamaru Usman has a lot of people that are pushing right now for him to get to a title shot. Hey, I don't care that he lost his last 3 fights. I don't care that the guy who's holding the belt right now just beat a guy who beat Kamaru Usman twice. MMA math, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 always in this sport. So MMA math means nothing. So who cares? Let's just put Kamaru Usman in a title shot, even though he's on a 3-fight losing streak. Let's just do that. He has a lot of people in the media right now pushing for that. There's also people pushing for him to just do a number 1 contender fight with Shavkat. Just have him fight Shavkat Rakhmonov. And even though a lot of people believe that Shavkat is next and he will be fighting Belal Muhammad, let's just have a clear-cut number 1 contender fight, Shavkat versus Kamaru Usman, and get it done that way. I'm saying neither one of those options is going to happen. I'm saying that the UFC is just going to go with Shavkat and have Belal fight Shavkat, and then Kamaru is going to fight the winner of that fight. But I also don't believe the first option is true, because I believe they're going to let Kamaru Usman fight once and then give him a title shot. I don't think the UFC is interested in giving him a title fight. Even though he's one of the greatest welterweights of all time, I don't think the UFC is interested in giving him a title shot over a guy who's undefeated when he's coming off 3 losses. Okay, yes, I know one of those losses was up a weight class, but it's still a loss. So Kamaru Usman's going to have to fight 1 time before he gets this title shot. Now, the obvious question is, who does he fight to get that title shot? And there's multiple options they could go with. Do they want to go with who are the higher ranked contenders? So you go with someone like Jack Della Maddalena. I hope I said that name right. Do you go with Ian Geary? Do you go with something like that? Or do you go with something like Jeff Neal? Somebody who is higher in the rankings but not that high? Or do you go for somebody like MVP? Yes, I know he's further down in the rankings, and I know he lost his last fight, but do you go with him and justify it by saying, hey, this is a guy who, had he won his last fight against Ian Geary, he'd be in line for a title fight, and Kamaru Usman's coming off 3 losses, so let's put a guy coming off a loss with a guy coming off a loss, let's put them together, and Kamaru Usman would just go in there and do a Logan Storley to MVP, just wrestle him for 5 rounds or 3 rounds, whatever the duration of the fight would be, and get a title shot that way. Do they go with that option, or do they go with someone like Gilbert Burns, who Usman's already beaten? Do they go with somebody like Wonderboy Thompson, who is somebody who has a recognizable name, but Usman hasn't fought him before? There's endless options. That's why Kamaru Usman was the biggest winner at UFC 304. He has endless options now, and he's 1 fight away from a title shot. So he was the biggest winner at UFC 304. So you've heard what I've had to say. You've heard my opinion. Now I want to hear from you. Who do you think Kamaru Usman should fight next? Hit me up in the comments section below. Like this video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on social media. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video.